Welcome back, guys. Exciting video today. We are going to be talking router bits. What do you need? What don't you need? I really want to specifically focus on what the on-site millwork installer needs in his router bit arsenal to be prepared for what's most likely to come across your path to execute jobs well. Before we decide what router bits we're going to select to carry in the field, we've got to understand what routers we're actually going to have in the field. I've done different things over the years. I used to carry around a Festool OF 1400 router, which is a really nice router, but I found that I just simply never used it. What I do use a ton are these cordless compact routers. My everyday carry in my work vehicle is 2 of these routers. My thinking is I always have a Roundover bit chucked up in one, and then a lot of times I'm using different specialty bits in the other one. If I need to do an operation that needs a larger router, I'll always have that in my mind, and usually I bring that router with me from the shop. I've really been loving the new mid-size router from Milwaukee. This is a cordless router, comes with the plunge base and fixed base. It's a really nice kit to grab and go out in the field. You'll notice I've got 3 different boxes here to show you. It used to be whenever I worked by myself, I had a router bit box that stayed on my van with quite a bit of different router bits in it. As you can see here, it's mostly empty now. I don't even really need to have this on my van. The thing that I realized is it was a lot easier just to keep the router bits by my router in one of these Milwaukee packouts. You can see here, this is the bottom drawer that I pulled out of one of my packouts. And I've got a foam insert, keeps my biscuit joiner, battery, pocket door hardware jig, and then I just use the foam to put all of my common router bits around the perimeter of the router. This has worked out really well for me. Using this system of having the router bits right by the router works great because my employee has the exact same thing. He uses the same setup as me. He's got the same drawer setup, same router bits. That way we're very systematized and modular in the way we're going about the job, and it just works a lot better than having like random boxes of router bits traveling around all over the place. Now, almost all of the rest of my router bits stay in this Festool sustainer here. And the reason for that is I still like to be able to grab this and go if I need to be able to take my router bits to the job site and I know I'm going to be needing some specialty bits. I can still easily just grab this sustainer, put it in my van, and take it with me. I don't like to leave this sustainer in my van. For one, it does tend to condensate on these metal bits and they do tend to rust being in a vehicle. But also years ago, I had a whole box of router bits like this completely loaded out, and I left it laying on the job site over the weekend and somebody took it and stole it. So I try not to make that temptation for somebody again. It's just too much money in one box, so I try and keep this in the shop as much as possible. A lot of you have probably heard of an everyday carry system, an everyday carry flashlight, everyday carry pocket knife, everyday carry pistol, whatever. This is my everyday carry router bit setup. Let me show you what I got in here. This right here is my primary job site router, and probably at least 90% of the time it is chucked with a basic Roundover bit. My Roundover bit of choice is a Whiteside Roundover bit with a 5/32 radius. The reason that I choose a 5/32 radius is because a lot of the millwork that we install comes from the manufacturer with a 5/32 radius on it. So it's nice to have that same bit in a router all the time. That way, whenever we're fabricating things, we can ease the edge and match it to our millwork that's come from the manufacturer that way. So starting with our Roundover bits on the front here, obviously the 5/32 Roundover is chucked up in the router. Then we have got a 1/16 radius pilot point bit. I've showed this 16th radius pilot point bit in other videos. I use this for my face frames a lot. It's really great for breaking the edge and just makes it take paint better on site. The only thing you have to watch is that because this isn't an actual bearing moving, it's actually spinning with the bit. So you don't want to put too much pressure, otherwise it can burn and leave a mark. And whenever you move into a corner, you want to keep it moving as quickly as possible. Here's a look at the 5/32 radius bit. This stays in the router, like I said, at least probably 90% of the time. Really just breaks the edge nicely, and it'll make that take paint really well. It's just a good general purpose easing bit for breaking those corners. One tip to keep in mind is if you want to give something a little bit more character and detail, you can always turn just your general roundover bit into a beading bit just by going deeper with it. Here we created just a little bit more of a detail just by setting that same bit a little bit deeper, gives it that beading roundover look. Now again, the reason I carry these larger radius roundover bits is simply so that I can do a bullnose in the field. So this would be for 1 inch thick material with a 1/2 inch radius, and here I've got this, it's a 3/8 radius for 3/4 thick material. I had this set just a hair too deep, but you still get the picture. A lot of times you can just hit it with some sandpaper across the front. It'll blend that nicely, and you can get a real nice bullnose just using a bit twice over. Now this next type of bit is probably my favorite bit of all time. It's one of the most useful bits you can buy, and not very many people know about it. This is an offset bearing bit, So what does it do? Whenever we're using templates, because as finished carpenters, we're usually mortising hardware, making jigs and things like that, most templates are made to be used with a 5/8 inch guide bushing and a 1/2 inch mortising bit. So if I want to use this template right here that I've got set down, I need to get a router set up. I need to have a guide bushing set up on the base plate. I got to install the 1/2 inch router bit. And then a step that a lot of people get wrong is you need to make sure that your 1/2 inch mortising bit is centered on your guide bushing, which is a whole other step if you want to do that properly. Well, this bit does all of that in one step. It's a 1/2 inch mortising bit, but the guide bushing is a 5/8 inch guide bushing. So it's accomplishing the same thing. And because it's, machined to extremely tight tolerances, this 1/2 inch mortising cutter is perfectly centered on the guide bushing. Whereas if you try to use one of these setups and you don't center it, it can end up being off, and it'll make the work that you're doing not turn out quite right. Here I've got a hinge template, and you'll see that it says right here, 5/8 radius corners, use a 1/2 inch hinge mortising bit and 5/8 outside diameter router template guide attached to your router. So basically what it's saying is you either got to do that or you need to have one of these. So you can probably kind of see here how the bearing is a little bit wider than the actual cutter here. Now you can see here a typical flush bit. It's got your cutter edge is perfectly in line with the bearing. If you look at this bit, you'll see that our cutter is offset a 1/16 inch from the bearing. Now I keep a few different versions of this. This is a pretty shallow cutter right here. This is the most common one we're going to use, all you really need most of the time. Sometimes you need to be able to go a little bit deeper, so I've got a little bit taller cutter height here. Now this one is really cool. This one is a down cut cutter head. So this is going to be perfect for mortising hinges. Because the spiral is slicing downward, it's going to leave us with a clean edge whenever we're routering. The reason that most templates are made this way is so that we don't cut into our template as we're routing and wear down the template. Having the offset protects the template. Now notice here as we pull our template off, look at how clean the cut is going around here. We don't have any fuzzing of the wood. That's because of the down shear angle, that this is a down cut bit, so it's keeping this outside edge nice and clean. So these offset template bits are an absolute must-have, especially whenever you're just doing a one-off task. It's so much faster to grab one of these than to set up a router with a guide bushing. Now there are some limitations to these offset bits. As you can see, the cutter height is only, I've only found one with maybe like a 1/2 inch tall cutter height max. Works for most templates. I even make a lot of my own templates designed to be used with a 1/2 inch bit and 5/8 guide bushing, but you will get into situations where you're going to use a multi-step template, such as this Templico template for a jam switch here, which I've actually cut into. Ignore that. But even though this template is designed to be used with a 1/2 inch cutter and 5/8 guide bushing, I can't use this router bit for that because the guide bushing is going to be under this red part right here, which is the 2-piece aspect of it. So it's not going to work in every situation. Now what you need to have for a template like this is an actual guide bushing. So on my work vehicle, I always carry an extra base that has a base plate installed on it with a tall 5/8 guide bushing, specifically for doing template work like this. This is also going to give your templates the most protection. But that leads us to our next type of router bits, and that is just simply we need to have a variety of 1/2 inch mortising bits to use in situations like this, or in situations where we need to do a really deep mortise. That will bring us to these lovely bits in the back row here. Now all of these bits are 1/2 inch width cutters. You can see we've got a variety of cutter heights and a variety of flush trim bearings on them. Most of these just have a bottom bearing. Here on this bit, this is a flush trim bit with a bottom and top bearing. And then here you've got one that's just a regular mortising bit without a bearing at all. So I always like to carry a lot of, I like to have a variety of cutter heights on these so that I can match these according to the template that I'm using and the depth that I need to go with the template. This guy here, he's just a flush trimming bit, that's it. These guys are pattern bits or template bits. You can use them in a variety of different ways. And then this guy over here, it's a little bit cheaper to buy these without the bearing, not much, but just a little bit. And this would be used with a 5/8 guide bushing for mortising. Now the primary advantage to these template bits on the job site is it's very fast to make a jig or a template to match the hardware width that you're using exactly, and then just use a flush bit like this rather than an offset bit. So what we would use this for is we'd make our template, we'd CA glue some pieces together, throw the bit in the router, and then you can use that template bit just to go right around, just running nice and tight to your jig, and it's really quick to do all kinds of stuff. Really, I mean, just thousands of different things that you might need to do with this type of bit on the job site. It is important. Most of the time, as you can see here, these shorter bits get used a lot more, but sometimes you need to go deep with something, and you may need to start out with a bit like this and then transition to a longer cutter length and use a bit like this. So that's why I like to try to always have a nice selection of lengths with me at all times. Next type of bit that we've got to have on the job site is flush trim bits, at least one. Here I've got 2 of them. This is a spiral flush trim bit with a top bearing, and then here we've got a straight edge flush trim bit with a top and bottom bearing. This is a very versatile bit because you can use it to flush trim something by either guiding your bearing on the top or the bottom. So it just gives you a little bit of versatility. Now in my experience, these spiral flush trim bits go just an incredibly long time. They stay sharp for a long time and they work great. They're an excellent value. Again, versatility here works great as well. This guy right here is a really special spiral bit. This is a compression bit. So you'll notice that the spiral actually it switches directions. So it's a top cut and a bottom cut at the same time, and it kind of meets in the middle. So it's going to give you a clean cut on your top edge and bottom edge. I keep one of these in the shop all the time. So basically we've worked our way all around here. I've got a few more specialty bits here and here to tell you about. So this, you probably know, this is a rabbeting bit set. This is for making rabbets on the edge of a board. You can easily switch out your guide for a variety of different guides right here, and that will give you different size rabbets based off of what guide you select. Obviously, because we are primarily using compact routers, you want to stock a rabbeting set with a 1/4 inch shank to be able to work with those routers. It does just work out pretty well that if you're using the stock base plate on your DeWalt compact router, this rabbeting bit will just fit, so you can use it with the stock base on your router, which is really handy. Next up, I think we'll go with our standard chamfer bit. A chamfer bit is a bit that I don't use a ton, but you really want to always have it on hand because you just don't want to be without it. I'll get this out if I want to do kind of a random detail on an edge to dress something up. Maybe I'm making some plinth blocks for some handrails, something like that. This kind of bit comes in really handy for a variety of situations. You can see there, just puts a nice little 45-degree edge detail on a board, really handy to have around. And of course, the nice thing is if you want to make your chamfer larger or smaller, you can just adjust your router base down taller or shorter accordingly. Another honorable mention would be this 1/4 inch slot cutter bit right here. I use this for barn door guides. It's got a bearing here on the bottom, as you can see. Cuts a 1/4 inch wide slot in anything you want. So kind of handy to have around. I use this just for barn doors. And I almost forgot this guy hiding right over here. This guy has proven actually to be really handy over the last year or so. I've used it a few times and it's worked out great. So this bit puts that little 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch rabbet on the edge of a board. I do a lot of nickel gap, which a lot of you might call shiplap, but nickel gap, and we use this detail quite a bit, and it's really handy just to be able to put this bit directly into the router and achieve this edge detail. Last but not least, we've got these two guys right here. You're probably wondering what in the world these things are. A lot of you are probably familiar with this type of bit right here. This is a biscuit slot cutter. So the cutter width right here is gonna match the thickness of a biscuit. So you can use a cutter like this and use biscuits for all kinds of different scenarios. Now, certain situations, we as finished carpenters are having to be Houdini with wainscoting, joining skirt boards and 1x material, perhaps that is already on the wall. The downfall to this type of bit is that the bearing is on top. So if I'm trying to put a slot in this piece of 1x and this is my wall, I have to have a very, very shallow cut, and it's just not ideal. So my good friend Justin came up with this. These are biscuit slot cutters with a bearing on the bottom here. So one is for number 10 biscuits, one is for number 20 biscuits. But the beauty about this is you can put it in your router, and if you've got 1x that's on the wall already and you want to slot it for some biscuits to join another piece together, you can get this cutter nice and deep, all the way down really close to the wall if you needed to. But that's what that's for. It's a biscuit slot cutter with the bearing on the bottom. Primarily handy for wainscoting situations where you've already got 1x on the walls and you're trying to put a slot on it to join something up to it. So guys, I hope that you have found this video helpful. These are the bits over the years that I've found I actually use on the job site and actually need. It's really not all that many, just takes a little bit of an upfront investment, and then you're pretty well covered for whatever you're gonna run into on site. But I hope you found value in this video. Affiliate links to all of these helps me out a ton. If you guys are gonna buy these bits, hit up those affiliate links, add them to your cart, gives me a kickback and makes it worthwhile to make these videos. I appreciate the support. Let me know what else you wanna know, what else you wanna see on the channel. Drop a comment, like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.